Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Human SOS Show. We are so glad to be with you here today with our weekly show. and It's a real honor to have with us. You see, we've got four faces here today, and a dear friend of ours, Lila Smith, is with us today. Lila is one of the best communication coaches around. I've been fortunate enough to work with Lila in a couple of master class type settings, and it's just been tremendous. So we're excited to have Lila here with us today. So Lila, welcome.
Thank
And
you.
a couple of admin things. Just remember, as you join, to be sure and type in where you're joining from. And then we're always welcoming for everyone to type in thoughts and comments and questions in the comment section. So here we go. Anton, you want to get us started with our introduction of our topic?
Yeah, very cool conversation today. We have two experts and then Kevin and me here talking about communications, really focusing on relationship communications because we're continuing to talk about the life aspect of stress management. And I think that relationships and communicating with those relationships effectively can be a stress reducer or it can be a stress inducer, right? It can create more or less stress. Uh, Lila's a great friend of us, and I was super excited to have her. But before we get into the whole article. Let's do the agenda. Kev, will you pull that up next? So we won't necessarily dive into this, folks. I want you to ask questions because it's rarely we get this much talent on our show. Both of these ladies are amazing at communication. Feel free to ask any questions that you may have. We may have an agenda and talking about, seek to understand, not to be understood, high and low context cultures, delivery is just as important as the message, and then different environments of relationship communication that we may or may not get to. But what's more important is the stuff that you care about and make sure that we get to use the time effectively. So let's get into HR news of the week as we always do.
Okay, welcome, Lee. Glad to have you, Lee. Lee has been with us before. He's also joined me on Wisdom Seekers before, so welcome.
You share some good stuff. Most don't know that Kevin has his Wisdom Seeker podcast. I don't know what you call it, live show. Every morning I tune into it at 6 o'clock my time. I think it's 8 o'clock Eastern. Dude's pretty wise. You guys should check it out. What's that?
I said thank you.
Oh yeah. So just an interesting article came across. I think it was written Friday. Shout out to Stephen Miller who wrote that. I'll always share the link below if you guys want to read the whole one. We're just going to cover some high level points and just get a take on what you guys think about it. But 2022 salary increases look to trail inflation. So I'm sure we all been to the grocery store and we see the gas prices and everything else spiking because we've infused a tremendous amount of cash into the economy, and that's what's going to happen. And when we're looking at things, the median total U.S. salary increase budgets for 2021 are 3%, on par with previous 10 years. So it's not just something that goes up and down drastically. We're usually within 2 to 3%. And after being a non-issue in wage determination for several decades, strong inflation in 2021 and 2022 could lead to greater demand from workers and unions for a cost of living adjustment in 2022. The guy that they interviewed was a union rep that talked about this. And I just want to get your guys' thoughts initially, before I go on my soapbox about it. But what do you think? Do you think companies are actually going to make the adjustment, or we're going to continue with that 3%, even if we can potentially face a 7% inflation?
Well, before we get into it, welcome Dr. Sabrina from Japan. Glad to have you. Anyone want to grab the thoughts on inflation and keeping up with it?
Just a general remark from my side. I think this is, like last week, an article mostly aiming at the US or North America, because I don't think that's going to be the case in Europe. At least I've not heard anything. The only thing I see is that businesses are closing, people are losing their jobs. So I have not heard anything about a recovery and hiring people at a higher wage.
I think here in the US, you're going to see you're going to see wages rise at the lower income level because a lot of those are the jobs that are having a hard time getting people to come back to work, go back to work. And so there's a two-pronged issue going on, right? Which is that people are disincentivized to work when there are great amounts of benefits being given out. And then the other side of that is why should they want to go back to work if they're not paid at market rate? And so if the demand for workers is high, then the rate is going to go back up. Hopefully that's going to mean an increase in our workforce and an increase in our overall morale as a country following one of the most devastating times in our history.
Yeah, it's been interesting because here in the Southeast, we actually experienced a problem recently that gives evidence to the how sensitive or fragile our logistics system is, and that we had a pipeline shut down and we were out of gas in the Southeast. And even once they got the fuel moving again, the problem was that we didn't have workers to drive the vehicles, trucks, to deliver the fuel. So we've got a number of factors that are going to enter into this. And of course, just fuel prices in general, which drives so much of our economy. I don't know about you guys, but ours, during the height of the pandemic, I could get fuel for $1.34 a gallon. And now it's some places over $3 a gallon. So,
to me, and V, to your point, I know this may not be necessarily a global problem, but raises are still, I want team members to be educated about this, right? Understand your currency within your country, because currency fluctuations is another thing that can happen. And you feel like you got a raise, but your currency has lost value. So in the global stance, you've actually lost money. And there's discussions, and we deal with HR stuff, so there's discussions and payments about centralizing against the dollar or against the euro when it comes down to smaller countries and payments, because some years you feel like you're making a lot, and some years you're not, because you're creating imports that you can't afford because your currency is so low. And I'm not saying your Luxembourg area in particular, but this is a common global issue actually in a way. But I want consumers and employees to be educated about this, understand just a little bit about this in business standpoint, and take a look. Are you actually getting a raise? Because people go, oh, I'm getting more pay. But if the inflation is higher than your pay, you're either going the same that you were before, you've gotten more skilled, more educated, your performance has gone up, but you're either making less money or the same amount of money. So that's really why I wanted to bring this up, so people kind of, go, aha, I never thought about it that way.
Well, Anton, kind of interesting that Dr. Sabrina stares that they are challenged with staff shortages in Japan. So these issues are not unique to the U.S. And so we really got to take a bigger view. And interesting, she makes another comment that they're working almost double time during the crisis. So wow, big workforce issues all over.
Yeah.
And that's that stress component, right, Kev? Like that we talk about so much. It's the unseen stressors that the workforce, especially, the leadership is not prepared for. They're not often thinking about how are these employees stepping in and covering for lack of workforce. And then am I going to lose even more of them now because they're having to take on so much responsibility and so much workload that they're burning out faster, right? So as employers, I really am cautioning everybody, use the last year and a half as a big wake-up call. It's not something that is new. Coronavirus didn't create the only stress problem that exists in workforce. It's been existing. It just highlighted what's been going on for a long time. And luckily, it's forced some people to make changes to adapt to some of it. But we're in the infancy of what we can actually do to help the workforce to thrive better while under stress.
Well, and I still am convinced, because I continue to look at workforce and trends and things, and I am very concerned we're on the verge of some real crisis in the workforce. And I don't like to get negative, but I just watch it, and I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm dead wrong on it, but real concern there.
Things have to get worse before they get better sometimes.
Yes.
People have to be pushed to their breaking point. I think this last year and a half has really done that for people all over the world. And I hope, reading Dr. Sabrina's comment here, that to resume the job, they'll accept any conditions just to be able to get back to work. There are so many employers who are giving excuses right now, citing the pandemic, and yet having expectations of people that are greater than what they would have had pre-pandemic. So you can't do less for people and expect more and expect there to be no break. So I hope that break does come. I hope that there is a crisis caused by our response to the crisis, and that in response to our new crisis, that there are higher standards that we expect for how we are treated as employees, consultants, people on teams who contribute to the success of our economy.
Yeah. And that's one of the things we're trying to position Prospective Force to help be able to manage stress. It just continues to pile on. Welcome, Jake Shan. Glad to have you. Jake Shan's been with us before. So, all right, Anton, we keep rolling.
And yeah, and really, you mentioned manage stress, and Lila's talking about this. It's right now we're trying to. You can move on, Kev. We're trying to get from really bad to decent, but we're talking about how do we go from decent to great and really beyond? Because I feel like a lot of times companies get to a point where things are good enough and they forgot about the issue. They're moving on. And communication is a big part of this. That's what leading me into it. I think there's so much, I always say horrible analogy, but I say squeeze as much juice as you can out of everything that you do. There's so much juice left in the fruit when we don't communicate effectively. The messages are being sent out. Leaders are not listening to their people and they're assuming so much. So, how do you help leaders become better listeners, Lila? How do you help them to understand employee problems, or just even in simple relationships? How can we be better listeners?
I think we need a lot more objectivity than we have. Sorry, go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, I was just going to share. Dr. Sabrina makes a comment, says that adaptation is important, but human has limitations.
Yeah.
And that's so true. And I think we're close to our limitations right now.
I think we've been, as a country, operating in an unsustainable way. And Anton speaks a lot about this, and so does Virginie. And I've heard you all speak so beautifully to this. Anton's book, Death by, was it 10,000 paper cuts, right?
Just 1,000.
1,000, just 1,000. Yeah, but we've been operating at 10, right? Like we can die after bleeding out from 1,000 paper cuts, but we've been operating at 10,000, where we expect ourselves, our employees, our leaders, to do so much just to compete with people who have more sustainable practices and cultures than we do. So we're like expecting this level of performance that's supported by a lower stress culture, but we're providing a higher stress driver to achieve those same kinds of goals. And it's a lot of barking orders, and it's a lot of you must, and ego around it, even in the messaging. Suck it up, man up, messages like that are inherent to especially the United States culture, where we tell people what we need them to be without listening to what they need in order to be. And I think that's where, 2 ears and one mouth comes in really handy, is getting some objectivity, stepping away from what you think people should be doing, how you think they should be handling things, suspending your judgment and just listening to what their experience is, asking questions to invite that kind of conversation. And Virginie, I know that this is something that you coach leaders into opening up the lines of communication with their teams. So I would love to hear from you on this.
Yeah, thanks, Lila. Yes, actually, you reminded me at the beginning of my career, I was working for an American companies, and it was the beginning of internet. And every time we had a senior manager from the US who was coming to Europe for 3 months, and every time the person was like, yeah, I've got this great idea and we should do this and we should do that. And we were like, yeah, but here's not going to work for this reason, like maybe legal reason or practical reason, whatever. And so, okay. And then he or she was leaving, and then another person was coming. And every time, like for 2 years, it was the same thing. Someone from the US was coming. And it's exactly to your point, by listening, by really putting yourself in the other person's shoes, you will learn something you didn't know. And one thing I always tell people is that what is obvious for you may not be obvious for someone else, or what you think because it's familiar to you in your own country may not be the same in another country, even if the cultures are quite similar. So I fully agree to what you said, Lila, 2 ears and one mouth, listen and really try to put yourself in the other person's shoes, because there will always be something new that you don't know and that you will learn from.
Yeah. And Kevin, you were always speaking about servant leadership and being, and this proportion of 2 ears being twice the amount of effort as the one mouth that speaks out. I think that being in service, as you always are, of people on your teams, people that you coach, people who come to your courses, as you've been right now, you know, listening, I would love to ask for your mouth on this. How do you feel leaders can show that they are in service, that they are open when many of them never have been before, or their teams have not seen them that way? How do they transition into being seen as someone capable of empathy?
Well, it's going to be a shift. Use the old term paradigm shift for people, because a lot of, especially in the US, and I think it's true in some other cultures as well, but the idea that we manage everything, people and things. Okay, that's the traditional culture, management culture we live in and operate in business. And there's got to be a shift, because we can no longer manage people. We've got to manage things. I get that. Got to do all the KPI and all that, but we've got to step back from an authoritarian approach and become a servant leader. It will make a huge difference. It is more of a difficult shift now, because right now we have effectively 6 generations in the workforce, and they are very disparate at times in cultural views, experiences, and until we can get ego out of the way and get over leading by authority, we're not going to make that shift, that paradigm shift. And yes, one of the things that I've had to learn over the years as I have developed as a leader is that I've got to be equally ready to be the leader or a follower. I've got to be able to step into either role depending on the situation. Even in situations where I am identified as the leader, sometimes I still need to step back and with my team allow them at different moments to step in and lead. Ultimately, I'm still responsible. I can never walk away from that. It is all my responsibility if I'm the leader, but sharing the forefront, the limelight, whatever, we've got to get over, I'm the boss and you do what I say you're going to do. In my generation, it was because I said so. That characterized the whole style. And we got to get over that. If we don't, the workforce is going to fall apart.
Right. Well, so in a conversation, that might look like is giving an example to your team and showing them through your own actions first that you have made this shift. So once you've done the hardest part, which is what Kevin is talking about, making that shift within yourself to being willing to open more empathetic conversations, then you have to show it. You have to take some actions and probably do it over and over and over again, so people start to build that trust back in you as a leader. So this is something that Virginie also coaches leaders in from all over the world, how to be present with people. And she herself is one of the most present people that I've ever met. You are in her presence and you feel that she has this open heart ready to receive you. And not everyone is like that, right? There are some of us on this call who are more of a challenger. Anton, you're more of like a challenger, but you and I have had some of the most open conversations because you speak with respect and you ask a lot of questions. And in your challenging, there's always the hunger to learn. So I like using you as an example because you don't have to have the same kind of, tenderness as Virginie has in her personality in order to show interest, curiosity, and empathy. So I want people to realize that this is for everyone. If you're looking to build healthier, more open lines of communication with your teams, just asking the right questions, asking people to step forward in their own leadership, like Kevin is saying, be the follower for a moment. Ask your people, if you were leading this, what would you want from us as a company? What do you need? What are your ideas for this? And asking those questions and then taking action on the feedback that you're given over and over again builds that trust that people can come to you and that they don't have to have so much stress around it. But until you're able to do that, one thing you might do is look back, look in your emails, go back into your memories of previous conversations, notes from meetings that you've already had, and mine for feedback that you've already gotten that you can now take action on. And let people know that even if you didn't seem to have heard them before, you're hearing them now. Find something you can take a new action on that's already been suggested to you, and demonstrate to people that you are making a real effort to take their feedback to heart.
You guys make me think about, go ahead and click on the next slide, the next topic, but the world's become really diverse. The workplace, thank God, has become very diverse. Not as inclusive as we'd like yet, but we're getting there. We're making the right steps there. And for that reason, Lila, like what you're saying is so great. We need to seek to understand first. I'm not saying being understood is not important, but that's the secondary step. I think too many leaders are putting being understood in front of everything, and they're thinking about their message or whatever and how to craft it and all the tricks to say in it. But I'm like, but what you're talking about doesn't connect. It's because you're not listening first, nor do you seem like you care, right? I've personally struggled with this in the past with this specific thing. And I realized that it doesn't matter how effective you think you can be or how much stuff you know. If people don't feel like you care, whether it's a personal relationship or a professional relationship, it's just in one ear, out the other, no matter how well you said it.
Yeah, if I may add something, and going back to what Kevin said and Lila, when we said listen and ask question and put yourself in the other person's shoes, it's not only when we're dealing with people from other cultures or countries, but also people who are not like us. So like Kevin, for instance, you have a huge amount of experience and knowledge. But I know, because you're such a great leader, if you have a millennial in front of you, you're going to listen to that person. You're going to ask questions. You are really open-minded, and you're really trying to understand their point of view. And that's how I think people should be, no matter who their counterpart is, whether, as you said, Anton, it's professional or personal, really trying to ask questions to understand their point of view and to learn something. So as becoming a follower while being a leader, this is how we all become better together.
Yeah, and there's a term, because I'm still practicing, I think I'll be practicing forever, called active listening, because I joke with people that I have OSTD. And for those that don't know, that's oh shiny thing disorder, squirrel. Anyway, because of that, I have to really work at doing what we've illustrated here, of stopping and listening to a point. Anton will appreciate this, that at moments, if I'm in a group and I'm addressing someone in the audience with a question, I will assume what we call in the military parade rest, because it's a physical cue to make me focus on that person, not what my answer is going to be, what I need to respond. And even, sometimes part of the problem is people are not listening because they're figuring out how to make themselves look smarter than the person they're talking to. And that's truly an unfortunate approach. And so, we've got to become active listeners. And as Lila mentioned earlier, we got to do something with what we get. If we don't, active listening is worthless. You can listen, take all these good notes, and then go on your merry way. You're kidding yourself, and you'll lose the loyalty of people that theoretically you want to follow your leadership.
No, they'll feel like they wasted their time, or like they invested in a conversation where they felt that there was trust and openness and respect. But then if you're not willing to follow through by taking a new action, then not only did they spend that time on you, but they weren't actually respected. So now they feel fooled.
Yes.
You've done the first part, but not the second, which kind of not only negates the first part, but it makes it feel like a loss. Like now they've spent less time in their life, living their life, in accordance with their own values. And you've like robbed them of these moments. And it feels like a bit of a death. Every time we feel we've wasted time in a relationship, it feels like an investment that goes into a dark, empty hole.
Yeah, or it's what it can do as well. If you're not taking action, what you should do is provide feedback as to why you're not taking action or why you've decided otherwise. I think this feedback loop, like as you said, so you said so well, Lila, you need to take action, otherwise it has no point. But if you as a leader decide, okay, I've been told this and that, but because maybe I have another point of view, I have another information, then I will decide otherwise. But let people know that you've taken their feedback into consideration, because as you rightly said, this is how you build trust, and this is how you make relationships stronger. And if you just don't, then yeah, you're losing everything.
Well, I'd love to share some stuff from theater about active listening. But Anton, first, you have worked with many leaders and managed teams of a bunch of people, right? And I've heard you speak about transparency and the role that transparency plays in reducing the stress of an overall workforce. Would you share some of the things that I've already heard you say with the audience today so they can get that too?
Yeah, of course. I mean, transparency creates trust, and I've over-indexed on it in the past where I've gotten in trouble because I overshare. But I go, these are grown folks, and they want to be treated as grown folks. They want to feel like they're part of the system, part of this company, not just a cog in the wheel. And when we are not transparent, when we're holding things back, people can see it, they can read it. People are way smarter than many managers, leaders give them credit for. So I'm a firm believer in let it out, let people know, and help them deal with it. It's kind of, you talk about, here's what I can't do, but I'm not going to hide it from you. I'm not going to avoid the conversation. I'm going to say, this is outside of my control right now, but this is what I can try to do at least, or at least thank you for bringing this up. I'll send it up the chain. The only thing I would say about transparency is don't blame your chain of command for stuff. Don't be like, oh, this is transparency, but it's all their fault. I've seen that done many times as well. So be transparent, own what you can, and maybe sometimes don't be overly transparent when you speak too soon. And it's like, okay, I heard some news and I overshared. That's where I've gotten in trouble.
Well, and Anton, that you're getting into something. When I teach leaders, one of the first concepts I tell them is lose the phrase "if they," because every time we say "if they," most of what follows is an excuse of some kind, and it usually involves blame, and it is not productive. And by the way, as a leader, when you do that, you have just set an example for your team to do the same to you. So if you do that, don't be surprised when you're the next target among your team. So
the thing you guys are making me think about as I'm listening to you is I love sharing mistakes, guys. I'm transparent about my failures because I think that by opening up about them, we can own them better, we can grow through them better. And I used to have an open door policy, right? But nobody walked through that door. Well, that doesn't make sense. I was like, why aren't people coming to me with problems? They stopped coming to me with problems because the minute they walked in, I tried to solve the problem. Right? I already knew what you're talking about. I already knew, I've seen this, I heard this a million times. Here's the solution. I'm willing to work with you and make it done. And even though I had all the right intentions, I was seeking to be understood versus fully helping them be heard and really understanding the problem. Even if it's the same kind of problem that I heard 100 times, I am learning to sit there and listen and ask questions. And because everybody may have a slight different take, but most importantly, I want them to feel understood. So whatever I open up with next is going to be taken seriously and not just like, oh, he's just brushing me off, or here comes Anton again being the problem solver.
And want to throw in welcome Wes. Wes was actually our guest last week, and glad to have you with us today, Wes. And Wes makes a comment that fits in with what we are talking about. Another angle, it says, I just jumped on and this may have already been addressed. Hitting send in an email or text does not mean the message was received as intended. And nonverbal communication is such an integral part, and so much of it's lost in our electronic communication, and a lot of people figure out the difference there, and so very key. Lila, your thoughts?
I think that's absolutely. I speak to this a lot. It's when you are using only verbal, which can also be written communication, when you only have that option, you need to articulate things that otherwise people would see in person. You have to put your face into words, put your nod into words so people understand, I'm acknowledging you. I recognize what you've just said. And to Anton's point just now, it might look different for every single person. So actually saying, I think that what you're saying is that this is what this is for you. Is that right? Did I get that right? So really confirming that you recognize each individual's experience of whatever the topic is, and doing that in words when you don't have the nonverbal communication as an option, because that just is how we're communicating a lot now. Until I, invent my intention keyboard, we're pretty limited. But we have emojis, right? Like, people have been doing this since the beginning of AOL chat rooms, creating emoticons. The little winky face, a semicolon, dash, close parentheses. It's a little winky face to imply to people, hey, I'm saying this kind of tongue in cheek. I'm delivering you a joke. I'm giving you humor. I mean this in a positive way. I'm actually trying to get closer to you through humor in this moment. All of that is said with an emoticon. So when people say emojis aren't professional now, I say, what do you suggest instead? You end up with very long emails if you have to clarify every single one of your intentions. But I think if you just do it a few times, not necessarily with emojis or emoticons, but making sure that you go back through what you've written and ask yourself, did I include enough that the person is going to receive it in the way that I meant it, without those nonverbal cues that Wes was talking about? And that mindset of, it might be different for this person than for someone else, even if it's the same piece of feedback. Anton, I'm so glad that you said that, because it's vital. And especially in keeping us present in our listening. My background is in theater, and that's what I teach from. We have had to use the same script every single day for years if we're in a play, in many cases. But you have to have it feel fresh every time. And the key to that is allowing it to actually be fresh. The words might be the same, but the actors are not the same. And something is different about them every day. The audience is not the same. The world is not the same. The context, because something happened in the news, makes the same words mean something different one night from the next. And so being open and spontaneous to what you receive from people in the moment, and asking yourself, what is it right now? It does change the story. It does change the play, even when the words are the same. So allowing yourself to be spontaneous and open and present in the moment, it's something I feel like everyone should study acting in order to do. But it's because of that. It's because every conversation is different. Even with one person giving you the same feedback twice, which shouldn't happen. But if it does, it means that you have an even greater opportunity the second time they've given it to you, because it means they care enough to give you a second shot. And so respecting that moment, honoring and acknowledging, you've said this to me before, I'm receiving it differently this time. Then you're the one who gets to change the conversation.
No, assumptions, I hear the word assumptions, not the specific word, but I hear we just do that all the time. We assume we figured it out, we know what it is. In Kevin's and I world in military, assumptions can be deadly, right? I fired, a large cannon that can create a lot of damage. And if I assume that things environment hasn't changed and I act the same way as I had before without finding clarity and remeasuring things, there can be really dangerous consequences. But it's not just military. The same thing happens in real world. We'll click on the next slide, Kev. It kind of leads me into that. And the interesting part, the second part, is being understood, right? Okay, now you got it. Now you've heard them, hopefully the right way. Now we need to move on and helping them understand clarity with how we're delivering and not making assumptions. And V, you always help me to understand cultures better. At least try to. I will never be on your level, but I'm now more conscientious of it. And one thing I think about when I'm speaking to people, are they from a low context culture or are they from a high context culture? Because in order to avoid assumptions in low context culture like Germany, United States, we have to provide as much detail as we can so make sure there is no assumptions. But at the same time, if you're in a high context culture, the listener is going to be more responsible for getting that out. Any thoughts on the difference in the world, how people go about avoiding assumptions and just high and low context communication?
Oh, Virginie, I would love to hear from you about this as my international expert.
V, you're muted.
Virginie, you're still on mute.
Sorry, yes.
There you are.
Yeah, thank you. So from my experience, again, it's back to what I was saying at the beginning, is really put yourself in the other person's shoes. And for instance, a German person would expect something else than from instance, a French person or an American person. So really, by doing your research, trying to understand how do they react, do they like, I always think about this example. If you have a meeting with German people, well, the first thing you need to ensure is that you are on time, because if you arrive 5 or 10, 15 minutes, then you already are giving the bad impression, and then you have to work even harder to rebuild the trust. While in Italy, if you arrive half an hour later, I would say, well, it's okay. There's no big deal there. So these are things that you need to take into consideration. Again, some cultures like mine in France, you chit chat. Maybe sometimes you close some business at lunch or around dinner, etc. While in Germany, you don't do that. You just go to the point. You go straight to the subject you want to cover. So really, it's being aware of how your counterpart works and showing that you respect them and that you're trying to understand them. So it's different every time. Of course, there are exceptions everywhere. Like I'm probably one of the exceptions. Not so many French people like myself who speak languages like I do. But in general, you can have a better understanding of who your counterparts are, how to speak to people. Are you talking to the big boss, or do you have someone at your level? And if you have someone who is from a senior vice president or CEO, maybe you shouldn't be the one talking, but maybe the CEO that is with you. So again, being aware of how is the business etiquette, how is the greeting, how to talk about things, etc. So it's very, very important, and it's often underrated, especially when you're dealing in a global environment.
Would it be fair to say that a good principle overall, and I don't like one size fits all approaches, but I think this one is something that we can use pretty universally, is the concept of responding rather than reacting.
Yes.
One of the things that I have had to learn and practice is to rather than respond immediately or react, which usually is, I've got to say something right this second. It's not always the best approach. I think most times, for example, if we stop, we need to consider, like Anton has shared on the slide here, the context. Okay, before we have an old saying, be sure to put your brain in gear before you put your mouth in motion. And too many times we have too many people opening their mouth and they haven't considered anything other than getting their words out. And so another phrase that I've learned that I like is measured response. Do I have to say something right this second? And especially in a mixed cultural group, probably it's a bad idea unless you really have studied the cultures and know them well and can express it multiculturally. And that can be tough because of the divergent types of cultures, as Virginia said.
Yeah, and I forgot to add as well, communication is, and Lila is the expert there in really how to say things the right way. And it's key, but another very important part when dealing with an international audience is also the nonverbal communication. As I alluded earlier on, if you need to shake hands and how, or how do you sit, or how far away from the person do you need to be, etc., etc. So it's really, really important to pay attention to this aspect of nonverbal communication, because again, in some cultures, it is maybe as important or even more important than just the verbal communication we're having.
Here in the conversation about context and how much we are or are not responsible for giving as a speaker or asking for as the receiver of communication, I think we live in, or at least three of us live in the United States, and Virginie coaches leaders in the United States, in a culture where we say a lot of things about responsibility, personal responsibility. And yet we take very little, I think, is what we're seeing a lot of. We take responsibility for giving people the information that we want them to have, but we don't take a lot of personal responsibility for making sure we receive all the information that we're going to need in order to best support our audience, our partners. So I think that if we adopt that I take responsibility as the listener to make sure I get your message, asking clarifying questions, repeating, saying, is this actually what you mean? Rephrasing it in your own words, and then identifying what the next action is that they would like you to take and getting a confirmation on that. Because understanding someone in theory is not as rich and is not as committed or accountable as asking someone, is this what you'd like me to do about it? And then actually taking that next action, as we've discussed.
Lila, you shared a concept I heard, I don't remember which setting it was in, that really struck me in communication. And it's the concept of a communication partner. Would you elaborate a little on that? Because that really helped me to go, okay, this frames discussion or conversation communication better. Would you share a little about that?
Another way of saying that is just your audience, right? But your communication partners, your audience, you're in it together. In live theater, even if there's only one person on the stage, if there's no one in the audience to receive that communication, it's meaningless. It's theatrical masturbation, basically. Like, let me stand up here and talk for my own good. Okay, enjoy yourself, but what's the point if you're not actually connecting? And so it is establishing that intimacy. It is establishing that connection. And you need more than just one person engaged in order to make that successful. And I think that's true in all aspects of our personal relationships as well. But in business, in work, and in a culture where you want open communication, having the awareness of who else is in the audience, who's on stage with you, who's responsible with you for the communication and the results of it, and seeing them as your partners rather than your adversaries or your accessories makes all of the difference in the world.
Yeah, I often take the expression, it takes two to tango, or in my case, It takes two to salsa, as you rightly said.
Well, and you're a ballroom dancer.
What you do has an action on the other person, and the person will react a certain way depending on what you've done or what you've said or how you've said it. So it's exactly it. Yes, you need to really connect with your audience. Yes.
Wes has a comment that I wanted to share. Here it says, more people have common sense than have academic degrees or certifications. People at all levels in the organization can spot insincerity, aka BS. Transparency, understanding your audience, tailoring your message is a leader's responsibility by all means. If you're the leader, you're responsible for the whole situation. And a mindset where followers must adapt to leaders is a formula of failure. Yeah, that's management. That's managing people, not leading people. That's where we mess up so often. And then followers will not stay behind leaders who are not authentic. They will not follow people that are not good leaders. And we're seeing it all the time now.
No, I love the communications partner concept. I've heard that in your mastermind too before, Lila. And, I started with this conversation and we said, squeezing the juice out of everything we can, out of every communication we have. We want to get as much out of it because every communication has an outcome in mind. It doesn't have to be a business minded outcome, but there's always some sort of outcome. And I spent some time in Japan. And if we don't understand how all of this stuff works that we're talking about, we can have really bad outcomes in the long run. Like, as an example, what I'm getting at is people don't say no to your face. It's disrespectful, but they will say it with their body language. They will say it with their tone. They will say it in many other ways because simply saying no is considered disrespectful. But here you go, not listening because you're just listening to the words and not everything else. And you're going to take the yes as a true yes, make decisions and actions based on that, and then get into a lot of bad situations because of it. So I love that we have to partner on communication to make sure that the outcome we're seeking is actually the outcome that we're getting.
Yeah, it's sales conversations. And I know you've done some sales coaching as well, Anton. The how can this be possible is a better question, right? And it's more collaborative. What would you need in order to make this a win for you? Is it information? Is it a plan? Is it a pricing thing? And so rather than asking, are you willing to do this? Or are you going to do this? Which is just yes, no. Understanding the circumstances under which it would be a yes means you're actually having a collaborative conversation. And then you know what responsibility you can take to make it so.
Do you work with sales leaders, like sales teams?
No.
You need to. Like,
only in terms of getting their, well, thank you. I mean, I work with people on communicating as teams, on leadership communication, but not on sales processes or on sales conversations. I do work within marketing communications and guiding the kind of information that people expose at what time to support sales. But no, I think Richard Moore is a great sales coach, especially because he talks about what we've discussed here, listening and asking questions and guiding people with your actual expertise, while acknowledging that each one of them is going to have a different reason to say yes to you and a different set of circumstances that are a win for them, and helping them then to draw from their toolbox. And I know some other, great sales coaches here on LinkedIn and in life, but I don't do sales coaching myself.
Well, to me, it's like that's what's missing out of most sales coaching. I think that everybody's so systems, and here's the right question to follow up. Here's the right close. I'm like, but this partnering concept, like of really partnering and understanding that we're partnering on a solution, and we have a whole bunch of inputs we could custom tailor to your solution that you need. Like this would go a long way for a lot of salespeople, and I've worked with a ton in my life.
You know who does this really well? Actually, EHealth. E like the letter, then HEALTH. EHealth is a company that helps people, especially seniors, to find Medicare and Medicare supplementary insurance solutions and help them get into an insurance plan that supports what their actual health and life goals are. And they have a consultative approach to every single sales call. And they have policies in place to incentivize their sales reps, who are really these consultants. And they incentivize them not to close every sale, but to have quality conversations. So they're measuring different kinds of things. We talked, Kevin, you've been talking about managing people. And I think that when you say that, you're talking about, you must have this many things, measuring the inputs, right? Rather than the outcomes. Or maybe it's, it's just like measuring the wrong things, really. But what they do is they measure how many conversations ended with a positive feeling from customer surveys. They get this information, and they don't give their reps a higher commission for a higher priced package. And they don't even let the agents see what those things are. So they're not incentivized to close something that just is more money. They're really incentivized to find someone the best fit for their lifestyle. And so as a culture, I think putting policy behind that idea has made their sales conversations more consultative, and has made their relationships so open within each sales call that they're able to truly transform lives, giving people the protection and security that they need to be in a plan where they have the ability to go and get a surgery that's going to keep them present with their grandchildren for the summer and able to actually get up on their feet and go play, or have a life-saving surgery, or just have the ability to tell their children, you don't have to worry about me as much as you had been, because if God forbid anything were to happen, I'm covered. And those are the kinds of results that they're looking for from their sales conversations. So I just want to shout them out as a company I know is doing this the right way, because you don't hear about that often.
That's really remarkable. I'm actually going through a situation right now where I have been handed a set of metrics that theoretically indicate success in what I'm doing. And I've been asked, okay, is this accurate? And so I've started backing up, and Anton, using some of our stress components of, can you control it? Can you influence it? If not, what do you do with it? And the same way with looking at performance measurements or KPIs, whatever, is if I can't control it, how can I be held accountable for it? Okay, maybe if I can influence it, there should be some accountability, but even then, so it's got to be a different approach to how we communicate expectations, and based on what. And I think that's pretty remarkable to hear about a company that is not so much focused on getting the sale as getting the relationship to get the best sale for the client. And
Right.
I think that is a key piece that is missing for a long-term relationship and loyalty. And I have to be honest, that is the same concept. You know, we talking about generations in the workforce. One of the big complaints with the younger generations is they're not loyal. It's because we've not set up a situation where they feel led to be loyal. And when we learn to lead in that direction, and part of it, a real big part of it is communication, because we, like Anton talked about earlier, is blaming each other. We do that generationally, and it's a real problem, and it's not productive. But really being able to communicate and set those expectations, but not based on just us, but as you say, Lila, our communication partner. What's the factor for them?
Yeah. No, and by the way, they have amazing sales, you know, like they do very well at EHealth, and they're growing like crazy. I know that they're actually hiring sales reps and sales managers and supervisors right now. So if people are watching and are interested in that kind of role, I would recommend checking out what jobs they have posted, because I know it's a great place to work. Bob Reese is their VP of sales. It's REES. And he's an incredible leader himself. One of the things that I've learned speaking with some of the people who work there is people who have what it takes to say, I think this is something that needs to change, are listened to. You know, people hear that there, and they want that feedback, and they take actions to change things. They integrate that. People were saying they wanted more professional development, and one of the first things Bob Reese did when he came to the company was figure out a way to put that together and run with it and give people what they needed to succeed. And so really hearing what people were missing, providing a way for them to have it, and then seeing the results. See what happens when you develop empathetic communicators on your sales force, rather than people who are just looking for a close to meet metrics in a desperation, money-driven mindset, has not only changed and shifted the culture, but has shifted the business in a positive way, and they're growing like crazy as a result.
They're controlling what they control, like you said, Kevin, right? Go ahead and give a shout out.
Well, welcome to Bob Ford. He's one of our regulars, and welcome back, V. Technology's great when it behaves, right?
Exactly.
But it's
Not
like
sure
you were
what
saying,
happened,
Kevin.
sorry, but I'm back.
Don't worry about V. We understand.
That's not a problem. Glad that you got back quickly. And by the way, Lila, Bob Ford, one of our regulars, is from Texas. And so,
hey, Bob, howdy.
If you've ever connected with Bob, he's a good guy. I know him from the education arena. So, yeah, lot of challenges. Anton, you were about to say something?
Yeah. Just listening to you guys, you're combining the 2 points with sales and controlling what you control, and just in general. Communication is one of the things we can't control. It's one of the things that we can get really good at, master, and truly become excellent at. A lot of what comes after is influential and sometimes non-controllable. There's so many factors that happen. And, so just my advice to anybody that listens to this now, listens to this later in recording, reach out to these two ladies, reach out to Lila, reach out to V, and control what you could control, because there's so much uncontrollable stuff in the world. Don't let your business, don't let your relationships fail because you're not controlling one of the most controllable things.
Yeah, we can only control a few things. Attitude's one. The other is what we do with our mouth.
Yeah.
And I agree with Anton. Lila or V, either one are so great. I know I've been blessed to have some time with Lila and learn from her. And I work hard on my own about communication. I still learn things from her and V as well, learning how to consider the context and what's going on. So definitely reach out and move forward. Well, we're running low on time, and so I'm going to skip ahead. Lila, or I tell you what, V, any last comments as we close out about communication?
No, well, I'm thankful for all your kind comments, but yeah, Lila is the expert in how to say things better. She's really great. I definitely can help when it's about talking to international audiences, but in regards to a pure communication, let's say, Lila is the queen. So thank you for having us, for coming to our show, Lila. It was great to have you, and I always love these conversations with you guys, Kevin and Anton. It's always great. And the only thing I want to say again to the audience is, like we said before, always start from your audience. It takes two to salsa. And so whatever you do, keep practicing. It's like everything, it just doesn't come like that. The more we practice, the better we get at. So don't be afraid to make mistakes and learn from them.
Lila, closing remarks? Uh-oh, you're muted, Lila. Touch the other button.
I'm using, that's the half my mouth, right? two ears, no mouth. That's what happens when we're on mute. Well, thank you all for having me. I just wanted to say how much I like this conversation, because we have complementary perspectives, and I think that that's what makes for the richness of conversation. So if I have one thing to give to people, one of the best ways you can practice empathy is to intentionally bring other perspectives into your circle. Go outside of your little echo chamber, the kind of things that social media creates, and intentionally seek out different perspectives. Find people who think the opposite of what you do, and do what I had to do as an actress. Find something that you can relate to in what they said. If you look up the hashtag affirmative disagreement on LinkedIn, you'll see an example of this model of debate that I created, where people have to identify something positive that they've learned and ask a clarifying question if they need to, in order to be allowed to respond to what the last point is that they've heard. So thank you all for the diversity of thought, perspective, and backgrounds that you brought to this conversation, and to our audience for bringing yours.
I wanted to share, Bob made a comment, and I think it's a good perspective, and that's self-regulation. That's part of what we're talking about, is to self-discipline. Self-regulation is so important in effective communication, and learning how to do that well is a key part. Anton, comments?
Yeah, my comment is, it's interesting listening to Lila and V toss compliments back and forth to each other, because they're both amazing, but they're also amazing with different specialties, right? They're amazing for different environments, different situations, and that just kind of shows what we're all about at Prospective Force. We're not trying to bring in a jack of all trades, and me and Kev could wing this. Me and Kev could talk about it somewhat and pretend like we know what we're talking about, me probably the least. But why not bring people and share clients and share opportunities and give people the best person for what their need is, under a centralized system, under a big umbrella that everybody communicates and understand when the left arm and the right arm are talking, but we're able to interchange and give the client the best person possible. So that's just my take on it.
Well, and I don't like to tout things much, but I will say that one of the things we are unique in as an organization is we come in and learn about you first, because we've got all kinds of principles and even some systems, but we don't come in and say, here's our system, everybody adapt to it, because that's like taking on the new fad diet. It lasts for anywhere from a day to maybe a year at most. And then when you're done, you're worse off than when you started. So what we do is we like to come in, get to know what's going on with you through some assessments and things, and then tailor our response to your situation as an organization. So feel free to reach out. A reminder, we have an assessment tool, a stress assessment tool, free on our website. Encourage everyone to go try it. All you're even risking is giving us your email. And I promise Anton and I don't go selling email lists to anybody.
I don't know how to market it anyway.
And so anyway, encourage you to reach out. Lila, what's the best way for folks to reach you?
I've changed my display name here to lila@saythingsbetter.com. And that is the best way to reach me if you're looking to work with me directly. If you just would like to continue staying in my orbit, seeing things that I write and listening to things that I say, follow me on LinkedIn. I am Lila Smith, creator of the Say Things Better method of intentional communication. And I would love to hear from you.
Very good. Well, thanks, everyone. We will be back next Tuesday at 11 o'clock Eastern. And I'm not going to go through the list of the different time zones because I'll probably mess one of them up. But join us. We're here each week, same time you found us this time. Encourage you to invite others to join us, because you as participants are the ones that make a difference. If we're just going to sit and talk to each other, we can do that other ways. We want to hear from those in the audience, because you make it such a better time. So thanks, everyone, and God bless. Have an amazing rest of your week, and hopefully we get to see you back next week with us. Take care.